the Dr. Digital podcast. And here we go for a great guest this morning. I'm really glad that I had Brenden Kumarasamy on today. He's going to talk about public speaking. And you know what they say for this particular podcast, it's the only podcast that talks to business leaders, CEOs who want to grow through social audio. So it's been pretty obvious why I want to get Brenden on the show here. It is one of those critical skills when you're talking about business and being able to present yourself. And it's what people say, what would you rather do? Would you rather attend a funeral or speak in public? Guess what people pick? They'd rather go to a funeral. So want to make sure that he can hear what Brenden has to say because it's really a critical skill, and listen to the end of the program as well too. We got a free and complimentary offer for you. So with that, welcome to the show, Brenden. It's fantastic to have you here. Let me say a little bit about your background. The founder of MasterTalk, a YouTube channel for the art of public speaking. How did you get into this area? Tell us a little bit about the story. Why this, and how did you do this in the first place?
Of course, Mick. Well, first of all, it's such a pleasure to be on your show. Thanks for having me on. And in terms of the origin story, it all started in university. I went to business school. And in business school, I used to do these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age were playing baseball or rugby or football, I wasn't one of those types of guys. I did presentations competitively. And that's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, Mick, I realized that as I was coaching students with their communication skills, that a lot of the things I was sharing with them wasn't available for free on the internet. Because a lot of the advice that you hear on communication is, hey, you should follow your dreams. You should get up on stage. And I was like, this is not practical at all. So I started making YouTube videos on the art of communication. It later turned on into a movement and a coaching business.
Okay. How long have you been doing this, and what would you say, and are there changes, is what I'm curious about. Are there changes in public speaking, and has there been an impact with the internet and social media and things like that? Because I'm really interested in social audio, obviously, as a podcaster.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was pretty up there in the Clubhouse days too. I mean, the other part of social audio that a lot of us don't talk about as much anymore. But yeah, so I've been coaching for 7 years now, Mick. And I would say the biggest trends that I've seen in the changes, definitely the pandemic was the biggest one, because it normalized virtual meetings. It normalized virtual keynoting in the sense that before then, the tools and technologies existed, but most people would rather just take a flight, fly business class and go sign a deal or go to a keynote. Whereas what COVID did is it forced us to evolve. It forces to evolve into this hybrid model that we're seeing today. So the biggest trend that I see that people need to get great at is communication is a versatile tool that you need to leverage across different mediums, not just in person anymore. You need to be just as good virtually speaking in a meeting. You need to be just as good guesting on a podcast. You need to be just as good creating videos. And the way that that communication gets distributed out is now through a much wider range of tools than there used to be.
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I mean, this would be a hot growth area? Because I'm interested in the growth notions, and then how would a person adjust to things such as virtual speaking? Because I know a lot of people get what they call the zombies because they get burnt out on these mediums. And then how does a person address themselves for virtual presentations as opposed to what they're traditionally used to make in person?
Absolutely. So let's go through those three key differences, Mick. So the first one between the online and the offline world is eye contact. So when you're in person, and let's say you're speaking to a group of 5 or 10 people, you're moving your head to look at people in the eye. But in online world, whether you're speaking to one person or even 10,000 on a Zoom call, you're only supposed to look in one place. And that place is the camera lens. That's the only place. But what's great about online is you can just stare in one dot and you can look at everyone directly simultaneously, which is an advantage you don't have in the in-person world. So my advice there would be have a post-it note next to your camera lens that says, look here or else. I love that one. You could put your favorite food, family, so you're always staring at the lens. That's the first piece. The second piece is energy. When we think about energy, Mick, energy, let's face it, is a lot easier to come about when you're in person. You can have lunch with people, you can talk to them. It's easier to bring that energy. Not as easy online. So what's the advice? The advice is remember the energy that you bring in person in the offline world so that when you go back online, you mirror the same energy that you're used to in person. And then the third key difference, and I'll throw the ball back to you, is really in terms of audience accessibility. So let's say you're speaking on a stage, you're giving a presentation. Well, if you want to get feedback, all you have to do is say, hey, Mick, you want to get lunch? And then you just get lunch with them and you ask. But online, there's a lot more friction to do that. So you need to force those interactions, whether it's through directly messaging people in the audience, getting coffees with them virtually, or even better, taking a few of those people and bringing them back in person so you can solidify a relationship and get better feedback for your presentations.
Mhm. So for a person who is maybe uncomfortable, and I'm curious about this as well too, like the issues of introvert, extrovert, are there differences in what a person will come across virtually and in person? And how do they do that? So what would you recommend and how do you handle those differences for a person, let's say in a company or an individual who wants to increase their skills?
100% mixed. Fantastic question. So the way that I think about this is when we think about introverts and extroverts, my perspective is never pros and cons. It's always understand which camp you fall in and leverage your strengths. So let's go through both really quickly. So on the extroverted side, a couple of pros. Extroverts are willing to take more risks.
Yeah.
They're generally much better at voice projection because they just talk more often. And the third one is they're very good with eye contact because they're always in social settings. So it's easy for them to look people in the eyes. So the key to being an extrovert is just do more of those things and also learn from the other side. So extroverts are good at these. So now they need to learn from the introvert to see what they do well. And the introvert needs to do the same thing with the extrovert. Let's talk about the introvert for a second. A lot of people don't know this, Mick. Introverts in many ways have a ton of advantages that extroverts can only dream of. And I'll give you a couple so people understand this. There's three in particular. One is listening. Introverts are fantastic listeners because they speak for less time, which means they listen more. So they're able to adapt the audience and the message effectively and much better than I ever could because I'm an extrovert, as you probably tell. The second piece is pausing. Pausing is the most foundational element of communication. Introverts have that mastered down to a T because they're used to living in silence, which is something that an extrovert just can't because we're always trying to fill up space. And then the third advantage that introverts have is they're a lot more accessible to an audience. Let's take Gary Vaynerchuk as an example. Love him or hate him. I personally love the guy, but a lot of people don't. You either love him or you don't like him. And that's the disadvantage of being an extroverted speaker. But if you take someone like Brene Brown, everybody loves Brene Brown. I don't know a lot of people who hate her. And that's the advantage of being an introvert.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting point because as an introvert, I know that a lot of people, when they make mistakes audio wise, they're trying to fill up space is the exact phrase that you were trying to do. And that's where things like the ums and the ahs come in for a lot of people when they're talking, because they feel like they got to fill it up. However, the introvert, and I'm thinking of like a comedian or a person who is presenting, they pause, and that pregnant pause is the whole key. You know, if you're telling a joke, you don't want to like tell the end right away. Pause, you know, so introverts are better at that. So it's a really interesting point. Could you give me an idea of whether it's individuals or companies, the kinds of things that you do, let's say, especially because it's kind of interesting, you have a YouTube channel, what do you offer and how do you assist people who are interested in what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, for me, Mick, it's all about a game of momentum. So what I take my clients through as I help them gain momentum really quickly in their communication. Because the biggest thing is all about convincing yourself that you can be an exceptional communicator. Because once you've convinced yourself you believe it's true, anything is possible. So what we do is we run free trainings every few weeks that people can attend. And through those free trainings over Zoom, they can learn about communication, really get themselves to the next level. But the tactic for people is really asking yourself, are you booking 15 minutes a week to work on your communication skills? And for most people, the answer is no. That means take a lot of the principles that we learned today, do some random word exercises where you pick a random word like phone, like TV, and start giving presentations out of thin air. But it's really a game of output. And what the top 1% communicators in the industry do is they practice consistently and effectively. So spend that time to get the result that you're looking for.
Yeah, and it's one of those other keys, because I go back to those old days in radio broadcasting, because it's very similar to podcasting in that you're sitting in a booth by yourself. But a lot of people would say, put a mirror in front of you, because what you're seeing then is how you are presenting and how you're coming across to maybe that one individual, make it direct. So a lot of things that you're doing and a lot of great things. That's why I just want to get you on the show, because I think it's such a critical skill about being able to speak. And I see the deer in the headlight look for a lot of people that, oh, got to talk, yeah, you got to talk. How do they get a hold of you? What would you recommend, especially if they're interested now that they've heard what it is that you do and what you offer?
Yeah, absolutely, Mick. Happy to talk about that. So, two easy ways to keep in touch. The first one is the YouTube channel. All you have to do is type Master Talk in one word, and you'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas effectively. And the second way is for those who are interested in coaching, visit rockstarcommunicator.com to register for one of our free trainings over Zoom. They're live, they're interactive, they aren't recorded webinars. I'm on the call, it's super fun. So go ahead and register for one of those and join us for a future session.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate it. I think it's such a critical skill, and I'm so glad to have you on the show. Thank you so much, Brenden.
Thank you, Mick. What a pleasure.
You bet. All right. So if you listen to the end of the podcast episode, I said you got a free and complimentary offer. That's a free website analysis. You ever wondered why your competitors are getting business and you're not getting those sales and leads? Get a hold of me and get a free website analysis. This is the only podcast that is set for social audio. Those CEOs, business leaders who want to grow through social audio, is the podcast for you. Thanks a lot for Brenden. Appreciate your time. Until next time, see you. Deus Vult.